Welcome to the Spiritually Ignited Paradox Literature Language of the Heart speaker gathering. All of our speakers are shared on our WhatsApp audio groups and speaker channels. The links will be dropped in the chat. If you're listening to this recording and need help, we have a way out that works. Please reach out and send us an email at connect@sipx.world and the crew will reach out and get back to you. We have invited Sean J. from Long Beach, California to share a message of depth and weight from the heart on the topic truth, relatives versus spiritual, and love transactional versus unconditional. 50 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Himball. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time it may be, wherever you reside. My name is Sean. I'm an alcoholic, and I want to thank Everly and Joey for inviting me. And I want to apologize on the front end. I do have to leave a little early, so I'm not going to get to hang out with you guys and chop it up. I have a meeting on Wednesdays that I secretary, so I'm going to segue from this right into that. But it's my loss. I'm really going to miss out on the opportunity to talk with you fine folk. I want to thank Everly for giving me an original topic. Of course, it can't just be anything simple with my dear friend Everly. It's always got to be complex, uh, But I love you. And I think what we're really talking about here, at least this is the way it hit me when I was looking at it last night. We're really talking about the difference between the state of mind and soul of a person who is in that state of mind that can only be described as savage, and or someone who does not have a conscious connection with a power greater than themselves, as to juxtaposed to one who does. And that's okay. We all are at where we're at. And the beauty that I want to share with you, this is something that I realized in the last couple of years, and I don't normally talk about how long I've been sober. I mention it when I speak. My home group is 435 Compton Intergroup in the city of Compton in California. My sobriety date is August 3rd, 1981. I like to really say the thing about that is important is that I got sober, physically sober, free from alcohol and all the drugs that I did at the age of 16. But I did not get free from the bondage of self until I was 51 years old. So that should give you a little bit of insight into my story. Relative truth is relative to wherever I am in the moment. And I know, I'm not sure, I didn't see if there was any newcomers, but even new people, but people have been around for a while. You've had this experience where what used to be true for you is no longer the truth. Your truth has evolved as you've grown. There's things that you do that you couldn't do today that you used to do. There's things that you used to believe that are no longer true for you, being relative to where you are, what you've experienced, how much you've where you're at in this process of the 12 steps, which really is a transformational process based upon spiritual principles. One of the biggest things that I realized with this whole thing in the last couple of years, and it awed me, it humbled me deeply, because I'm someone who came to you fine folk, hated God. I didn't want nothing to do with God. People who claim to believe in God. I am somebody who really thought that getting physically sober, that now I basically had a head start, and I was an edge up on people, and I could get what I wanted. I could get the life that I wanted. That I was no longer going to be in trouble with the police. I was no longer going to be compromising myself, and I was going to go out and make the life that I wanted to live, based upon my perspective, my relative truth of what I thought being happy, satisfied, and successful meant. But I realized over the last couple of years, it came to me that as much as I hated God and badmouthed God and mocked God and sneered at the idea of God and looked at you as weak, and I used to think, and I would say from the podium, I would be like, well, that's really nice. You all have your little magic friend when all your little problems are too much and you can just turn to your magic friend. Well, I got to handle this. I stand on business, sounds really good. But as our literature talks about, could it pass the acid test? And when I was honest with myself, I knew that it couldn't. You know, I've even said from podiums and meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, you people keep trying to tell me that I got to give all the credit to God for everything good that happens in my life, and anything bad is on me. Well, how about I just take the credit for all of it? Makes people uncomfortable. There was some intention of that also. And as I said before, it sounds real good on paper. Sounds powerful, but I couldn't live up to that. I could never live up to anything that I considered to be a position or character, because ultimately, really, I lack character. I was a character, and as I told you, this realization deep within in this heart space, this soul space, was that as much as I did all that against God and thought I had so cleverly dismissed the idea of any power greater than me, that God never left me. No matter how poorly I treated God, God still loved me. God still provided opportunities every day. I was just so blinded to any of it because of my selfishness and my self-centeredness. That was my truth relative to where I was in the moment. And in that relative truth, I was still loved by God. Or if you prefer, the great reality, Creator, Allah, Buddha, the way, you know, whatever label you are comfortable with, which is palatable to you, you know, that's okay. I just choose God, you know. I always think it interesting, and it's a shame to a certain degree, but I try to talk with people, and it's like, to think that God is so small that you can only get to God one particular way. That's a human construct. That's not reality. God created everything, all of it. It is reality. God is reality. Another word I like to use for that is harmony, balance. The only time I've ever had any harmony in my life, any balance in my life, is through my relationship with Creator. Not through my thinking, not even through all the service and things that I try to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, yes, there are components of all of that that really help. But like anything, I can get so far out of balance in service, in a relationship, you know, in whatever I do, that I lose that conscious connection, and it really becomes about me. So that understanding and that awareness that God has always loved me and has always been giving me opportunities that I could never see because I wasn't looking, I wasn't open to them. My heart was shut down. I lacked conscious connection. And when I lack conscious connection with Creator, the other part of this topic, transactional love, everything's transactional. I look at people of self, I look at people as commodities, and I put them in categories. They're almost like game pieces, you know. There's the people who assist me, who are helpful in my construct, me getting what I want, because that's really what it's all about. That I'm satisfied, that I get what I want. I'm driven by self-centered fear, that I'm not going to have enough. I'm not going to get enough. They call that, I think there's a clinical term for it. It's some kind of scarcity syndrome, I believe is what it's called. I think alcoholics have it deep. We have it deep, and addicts also. Never going to have enough. Always got to get more, you know. And so those people would be people that, I'm decent to. I like them. They help me. But it's not really love. They're useful. I'll tell you this, when push comes to shove and somebody got to get got, it'll be you before it's me. No matter how much I told you I loved you, no matter how useful you were to me. Because the reality is I can always get another one of you. I can always find another victim, another hostage, because I don't really have relationships as I know them today, healthy relationships that come through my relationship with Creator. And I love this person as a child of God. There's a connection between us, a shared respect and love and a state of awe. And that isn't how I've done relationships in the past. You know, I didn't even know that. I thought I truly loved people, but the reality is that I put up a perimeter wire around you. And if you stay within my construct, then we're good. I shower you with affection. I make your life easier, financially, economically, give you everything you want. You're my queen. But you step out of that perimeter wire, which is free will, which you have every right to, because it's your life. Well, I got a problem. I got to get you back inside the wire. And whatever it takes to get you there, I'm willing to do. And if I can't get you back inside my construct, you got to go. That's what I do to people I love, or I think I love. Then there's those that I perceive to be in my way, that prevent me or hinder me in my construct. Well, I have to neutralize you in any shape, form, or fashion. Really doesn't matter. Whatever needs to be done to neutralize you. And it's a perceived threat. You may not be a threat at all, but in my mind, you are. So I got to handle that business. And then probably the largest category, which in some ways is the saddest, about my state, the way I think, the way I live, the way I operate, this transactional way of life. There's people who don't even matter. You can't help me and you can't hinder me. You're like beige paint on the wall. You don't even really exist. I don't acknowledge you as a human being. I don't acknowledge you as a child of God. You don't matter. I see right through you. The spiritual price for that is steep. The spiritual price for the way that I've lived most of my life is steep. It's a price that has to be paid. You know, it isn't punishment. See, that's the beauty of all of this. None of this is punitive, this relationship with Creator. I have not found it to be so. Everything all those old timers used to tell me about my own conception of God, all of it was true. Good orderly direction, a group of drunks, you know. I'm not one that could ever get with that whole thing that you used to hear about, and it's still around a little bit where people talking about, make a doorknob your higher power. It just, to me, intellectually, it was just kind of, insulting. You know, I get the idea, what they're over. It's an overstatement trying to get you to really see a simple principle. And I didn't believe them. I didn't believe those old timers. I thought they was trying to trick me because I knew once they had me, then they was going to come with that same old stuff that I'd heard in Catholic school. It was going to be the same old transactional, punitive relationship with this God that the God they presented to me. Why would everyone have a relationship with that God? It made no sense to me. I got to get away from that God. That's why I love Alcoholics Anonymous so much. I'm not real familiar with CA. I've spoken at CA a few times. Um, I'm I did a lot of drugs, but I'm an alcoholic, and I talk about the program, and you guys utilize that book, so you're can follow along with what I'm talking about. I'm so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. See, they give you the time and the space and the path, the structure to sort this thing out for yourself, to have your own experience, to come into right relation with a power greater than yourself. See, because until that happens, really what I'm doing is I'm playing God. I'm always right. I think I know what everything, how everything should be. Everything revolves around me. You know, that's playing God. Doesn't necessarily mean I think I'm a deity. Some people might think that also, you know. But I just think I'm always right, and I know exactly what to do in all situations. I know how things should be. I have this delusion that I'm running some things, but in reality, what's happening is I'm being drug around by these defects of character. Impulse is a command. It's the same thing like when I drink. I don't have no say so. When people talk about they have a choice, I there is a time when I do have a choice, but it's through my relationship with Creator. If I am not living my life through Creator, I have no choice. If I think and feel it, I got to go. I got to do it. And for all of us, at one point, that was one of my dear friends at my home group says when Jose Cuervo Gold said, "Come hither," he had to go. It's that way with everything in my life. Without a relationship with Creator, I don't care if it's my sex addiction, my love hunger, my food, my relationship with sugar, my relationship with food, my relationship with material wealth, with working, with exercise, whatever it is. Impulse is a command left to myself. I may have all the confidence in the world until I don't. I may be very strong willed until I'm not. I may have all the answers until they fail me. See, basically, of self, I have two moves, and they manifest in a bunch of different ways, like I just said. How this disease, this spiritual malady, how it manifests in a human being's life. And it always comes down to two moves or a combination of both. I got to run away or I got to blow it up. And many times I blow it up and then I run away. I can't handle life on life's terms. At some point, I don't have an answer. And then I'm dominated. Bill Wilson talks about it in his Next Frontier letter, one of the most amazing, divinely inspired works in recovery. And he talks about what the real problem is, that he expects and demands what he wants to his exact specification in any moment. And he fights for it and he's defeated and he fights for it again. And when he can't duck, dodge, evade the consequences, then the depression would come. Then the temper tantrum would come, the self-pity, the morbid reflection, the physical altercations, the divorces, the split ups, the drinking, the drugs, the taking a bunch of medications that I don't really need. Then try to crawl out from underneath it at some point and start all over again. Bill talks about in the book how he would find himself in a bar pounding on the bar top. How did I get here again? How did this happen again? I've said that in my life without an ounce of alcohol in my system so many times. That same situation. How did this happen again? My strategy and my tactics were so perfect. How could have this gone wrong? And then, of course, I do what any, you know, seeking, self-serving, selfish and self-centered, self-absorbed alcoholic will do. I blame you. It wasn't my strategy or my tactics. It was my choice of companion, you know. About the best I could do is admit, man, when it comes to picking a woman, Sean, you, you have no picking skills, you know. Was nowhere near the spiritual law of that which you are seeking is seeking you. Water seeks its own level. Sick attracts sick. There was no healthy woman in her right mind with any exposure to me would stick around me. They would get away from me quick. Or any healthy person in any kind of other relationship, be it friendship, business relationship, you know. Truth relative to where I'm at spiritually. What I call love is really just the demand on people, places, and things to provide to me what I need in that moment to my exact specification for me to be okay. Everything's transactional. So how do we move away from this? Well, first, there's got to be a bottom. I got to completely be annihilated. All my human resources had to fail me. If I would have had one move left, and I'm talking sober, I'm talking physically sober. See, Bill had this experience, and many of our pioneers, they experienced this in their cups, and they were annihilated beyond any kind of physical or any kind of human aid. We had to raise the bottom. AA raised the bottom, thank goodness. If people like me and many of you would have came to Alcoholics Anonymous, they would have said, "Oh, you're not ready. You're going to have to go out and get some more." But they raised the bottom. And I'm grateful for that. So I had a bottom with the alcohol and the drugs, sufficient enough for me to get physically sober at 16. I had a moment of clarity. Most 16-year-old children do not have moments of clarity. I did. It's a blessing. I was laying in a little league field, baseball. I couldn't go home. So my parents said, "You come home one more time in that shape, you're done. Goodbye. We're putting you in some kind of facility." And I didn't want to go into another facility. And I laid there and I just left a house party that I didn't mean to be at. I didn't set out with the intention to get drunk or high that night when I left my house, but I ended up in that condition. And it's 1, 2 in the morning. I'm waiting for my parents to fall asleep. And I'm laying there and I realized that I was going to die, that some homeowner was going to kill me, shoot me when I was coming through their window to rob them. The police, I was going to be in some kind of police action and get killed by the police. Or I was going to die in some car wreck, drunk, or I was going to end up incarcerated. And I didn't want any of that. I wanted to live, you know. I'd already been introduced to Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, and a junkie is who 12-stepped me. who told me, I think you're an alcoholic. I think you need to really look at your relationship with alcohol. I was insulted, by the way. I already knew what an alcoholic was. I was that guy that pees himself and sleeps in the weeds and, just, pitiful, you know. Dope fiend sounds much more in line with who I am, you know. I made it home and I made that phone call to a member of Alcoholics Anonymous the next day and said, I need a meeting, Annihilation. Feeling that in your bone marrow, that you don't have a move left. See, I needed every drop of my suffering, every drop. If I would have had one less drop, I wouldn't have been ready. Ready for what? To come to believe. The second step proposition. Creator either is or he isn't. God's everything or God's nothing. What's your choice going to be, Sean? You know, for you to not only be physically sober, because I also knew at this point in my life that if I left AA again, I was going to get drunk. So I left AA twice, once for 2 years, once for 5 years. I had much more important things to do, sit around listening to you all talk about your problems. Sick people staying sick. There's money out there to be made. She's out there. That home I want to buy, those places I want to go, that stock portfolio I want. I don't got time to sit around with all you people. You annoy me anyways. People annoy me. That was another revelation that I had through this 12-step process, that I enjoyed being annoyed with people and that I would set them up to fail. I would put them in positions so they would annoy me so I could be judge, jury, and executioner. My God, that filled me with such joy. I just felt good. You could feel the arrogance and the pride and the superiority every time somebody didn't measure up to what I thought they should be. And I actually had moments where I thought I was what I should be. My hubris almost killed me. But I knew if I left AA again, I'd get drunk. And I always got to leave at some point. And I knew if that happened, I wasn't going to make it. I still had a little bit of a connection to this group of drunks, you know, the the A collective, the energy of millions of people doing the same thing. My first 8 years in AA, I call it being in the loving arms of Alcoholics Anonymous, a dynamic sponsorship. I probably made him my higher power. And when he died, I got, I didn't handle it well. Of course, I made it about me. I felt betrayed. I felt abandoned. I was angry. I was hurt. And then in the next 18 years, I was sponsored by a fool myself. I do not recommend self-sponsorship. It's deadly. It's deadly. I am so fortunate to have not drank, but that does not mean that I didn't suffer. I suffered deeply. The wounds and the scars, which have healed, the harms done to others, more importantly, I've had the opportunities, and God keeps giving me opportunities to make that right, to be free, to be free. At 28 years sober, I finally came to this place where I was totally annihilated, where all my human resources failed me and I didn't have a move left. And if you're like me and that day comes when you don't have a move left, that is the dark night of the soul. It felt like the end, you know, because there's only two choices in this moment. Ask God for help, which seemed impossible up until that moment, or drink. Because I tell you, I could feel the four horsemen riding me down. Frustration, terror, bewilderment, despair. King Alcohol was whispering in my ear, all those lies that the king tells us. And I also knew that if I drank, I wouldn't feel the way I was feeling right then. And I couldn't feel the way I was feeling anymore. So I got to the place where there was only King Alcohol or God with 28 years sober. I'm so grateful that I cried out for help. And it wasn't intellectual at all because there was no thought of how it sounded, what it looked like, what I was going to get, how I was going to barter or make this deal, what anybody thought, where I was going to end up, what am I going to get? None of that. None of that was considered. All that was considered in a guttural, broken human way was help me, help me. I can't live this way anymore. Woo-wee. The man that was sitting in that car, beating on the steering wheel, snot coming out of his nose, hyperventilating, crying, coming apart like a wounded animal. That cry for help, God presented that immediately. See, if it would have been me and you approached me, I'm looking at that as an advantage. Like, oh, yeah, I've been waiting on you. I knew it'd come eventually. Now, here's what you got to do. There was none of that. God did not press on me the advantage that he had. What I was given was strength and power, and I was uplifted. I was able to get out of that car that I'd been sitting in paralyzed for hours. I was able to walk into my house. And I remember distinctly walking up the walkway. This God better exist. This God that you all been telling me about my whole life, if that God does not exist, I'm dead. I'm done. Because I knew there was nothing else. I didn't have a move left. And I can't prove it, but I know it. I know it. I know it like I know the back of my hand. I had this overwhelming sensation that it's going to be all right. And I was able to come into my house and I was able to go to sleep. The next day, things just started changing. And the intellect will say, that's not possible. How does that happen? Coincidence. No, there's no coincidence. See, I was all of this, if you haven't guessed already, evolved around another relationship that completely went wrong. And I had done my best. She got the best version of me, and I still ended up in that place, not knowing how I got there. You know, hearing the same things that I heard from every other woman that I'd ever been involved with. And it was devastating. It was devastating. I thought I truly loved that woman. And to the best of my ability, I did, you know. But as I said, when you have someone in a perimeter wire and they got to stay within your construct, that's not love, that's control. You know. She wouldn't leave though. We lived together. She was as sick as I was. As I told you, water seeks its own level. You know. And she said, my name's on the lease and I'm not going anywhere. She already and this is how insane I was that period of my life. She left a woman to be with me. And when she left me to be with a woman, I was completely devastated and taken by surprise. I couldn't understand how this could happen to me. And she was seeing that person, but coming home and it was insanity. And I couldn't set a boundary. I was going under. And I know today that if I had stayed in that situation, if something hadn't changed in that moment, I probably would have drank, or I would have done something harmful to somebody. The phone rang. It was my job. Superintendent said, "Hey, our facility up in Northern California, they have things all screwed up there, man. I want to send you up there, see if you can get this thing back on track. Can you go?" I said, "When?" He said the day after Thanksgiving, which was in a couple of days. I said, I'm there. You know, God removed me from a situation I couldn't remove myself from, that I was spiraling towards madness and drunkenness, and kept me up there for 4 months. And in that time, I did some of the deepest work in the 12 steps that I've done. I thank my sponsor, my spiritual advisor. I'm so grateful for them putting up with my pathetic self-pity and the constant, just complaining, and they met that with love and the truth. My sponsor, and I have two right now. Uh, he has what I want, and when I met him, he had what I wanted, and I didn't know what it was. I know today it's humility and character. He has deep compassion and love. He doesn't cuss. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't tell me what to do. He's kind and gentle and a sweet, loving old man. And my insanity and my sickness, and I know how God works through people. Because the man I just described to you, I drove him to the point where he raised his voice at me, he cussed me out, and he hung up the phone on me. It was a slap in my face. And he told me the truth about my condition. And the G version is, he said, God's removed her from your life. You won't let go. You know, and he slammed the phone down on me. There was quite a few other flavorful words thrown in there about my intelligence and my character, you know. And it was like, oh my God, he's right. God's removed her. I won't let go. And I had this deep, deep experience and awareness in steps 6 and 7. And I fell to my knees and I started praying to God for help. Because of self, I couldn't let her go. I needed her to be a certain way. And she's 800 miles away from me and I'm still trying to control her. And I let go. You know, it was around that time. I wish I could tell you all that I became a completely different man. I was deeply connected to God, and I turned to love and kindness and sponsoring people and speaking and living my life in the way that I live now. But that's not my story. See, I had this deep love hunger. It was insatiable. And, but I knew that I couldn't be in a relationship. I knew I couldn't even date. And I went into a 6-year sex addiction that literally almost killed me. And that sex addiction was played out with escorts all around the world. Uh, when I was at home, it was 7 days a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. When I was in other countries, it was all day and all night. You know, I do everything like that. You like it, I love it. And I do everything to extremes of self. I had some spiritual development, but I was still very sick. I still didn't have a faith that worked. I still was kind of using God as a pinch hitter, you know. And I'll tell you this, I've come to understand that nobody can love me enough. There's not a pill for what I got. There's no amount of material wealth wide enough and high enough to fix me. You know. See, I understand. Our literature says that the root of my trouble is selfishness and self-centeredness. That the alcohol is but a symptom. The bottles are only symbols. And I agree with all of that. The real problem is lack of conscious connection with Creator. I play God. And in that state, I'm always going to be restless, irritable, and discontent. And I can't stay in the state of being restless, irritable, discontent. And I have to try to treat it. And I treat it the way that I've always treated it. And if it isn't booze and drugs, then it's going to be women. It's going to be work. It's going to be food. It's going to be something. It's all going to be of self-reliance. Some of it served me well. I survived. I didn't drink. But none of it gave me freedom from the bondage of self. At 34 years sober, I was in a five-star hotel in Bangkok, Thailand. I'm not suicidal, but I was so tired. I was so tired. And in that moment, I really wanted it to be done. Just be over. I'm ready. I mean, what else is there? I've been everywhere. I've done everything. Because I'm a person who acquires and consumes, and I'd already done all that. People, places, and things. I acquire them and I consume them. You know, and I prayed, and in that moment, I realized I had to give every area of my life to God, not just the ones I chose. Every area. I also realized in that same moment, in that time and space, and this may seem very simple to you, and you guys probably already realize this, but the rules apply to Sean. See, I thought rules were for like people who are dumb, simple, church folk, people who weren't smart enough to figure out how to hustle. You know, no, they apply to me. That was life changing. Through more inventory work, more prayer, more meditation, I came to realize that my two biggest defects of character were lust and greed. And that the value of myself that I created, that I made, how I saw myself was based upon money, property, and prestige, and my sex life. And on that basis, I'm always going to be on collision with people, places, and things. Even though I've had some spiritual development, even though I have a relationship with God, but I'm not living my life through that relationship. That's like an add-on. It's something I utilize when I get in trouble. Well, my way don't work. And then I get a little bit of relief. The heat gets off. But then I go back to doing things my way again. Around that time, I became a member of 435 Compton Intergroup. I got asked to speak, and I think the only reason I said yes is because it was one of my guys that called me, and I had a history with the Compton meetings. At one time, they moved out of Compton and they moved to Bellflower, which none of you know probably what that is, where those are, but it's about 15 minutes away, 20 minutes away. And I used to go to the Sunday night Compton group in Bellflower. So when my guy called me, and the reason I normally would say no uh, was because they needed a speaker within 3 hours. And I normally would have said, yeah, I have no problem speaking there, but you got to give me a notice. Because if I didn't have something to do, my ego wouldn't just let me jump at that because I need to appear to have something to do, you know. But for whatever reason, I said yes. And we went to the hall. And right away, I was embraced with that energy, you know. And there was Miss Dolores, big black woman. And she gave me this engulfing, engaged, present hug and told me who she was and how glad she was to meet me. And their format was a little different. And it was unique to me. And I'm not big on speaker meetings. I really don't like them. Usually, the only time you find me at a speaker meeting is if I'm speaking. Occasionally, there's some people that I know that carry a message of depth and weight. I just get tired of hearing drunkalogs. So that's why I don't normally go to speaker meetings. But their format is the fellowship of that meeting shares for about 25 minutes prior to the speaker. And as the speaker was really, really comforting. I really felt connected to their fellowship. And I'm sitting there listening to them, and the message is resonating with me. And I was like, you know what? I like this place. Man, I could stay sober here. I could have got sober here. This reminded me of my beginnings. And then I spoke. And when I speak, I don't have a canned pitch. Whatever I share, I share on some, familiar topics and themes because it's my experience. But I just pray before I share. And I just ask God to utilize me to the best of my ability that I can articulate the message of love, the message of hope, the message of recovery, the good news about this relationship with a power greater than ourselves that will solve all our problems. How can I convey that message in a way that is palatable, that resonates, that is relatable? And then I just go for it. I just start talking, and the words flow. You know, some people say I'm pretty good at it. I tell you now, it ain't me. It's God. I know who I am of self. I know who I am of self. One of my favorite prayers, and I say it pretty much every day, is God, please help me. I'm weak and I'm afraid. I also ask God to help me love as God loves. I don't ask for things. I don't even ask for people to be sober. I don't even ask for my sobriety. Thy will, not mine, be done. You know, unconditional love. That's what I'm talking about. From Creator that truly comes. I aspire to love unconditionally. I have moments where it seems really possible. I always fall short. I also believe, and it's not my words, I'm taking them from somebody else. Really, it's Thomas Merton. My desire to please God pleases God. My aspiration to love as God pleases God. You know, see, we were created flawed. We were created with cracks and creases and little crevices and imperfections for a reason. So this whole thing of this perfectionism, that's just another flaw. None of us are perfect. You know, those who try to portray themselves of that, I feel sad for them, and sometimes getting them free of that, because really all it is a pathway back to self-destruction. That's it's something that they use, and then they don't think that they have egos because they're always beating themselves up. And I always tell them, well, but all you think about is you. Because what you should really be doing is trying to help somebody else right now, but you're so stuck in thinking about what a pile you are, how hopeless you are, how you're no good, how you suck at everything, how nobody can love you, and all you think about is you. That's your ego. You know, unconditional love. I think we are so blessed, those of us in AA, CA, NA, any of it, because we are given so many opportunities. And it seems to me the closest that we come is when we're working with that new man or woman and we talk to them about the way out. We share with them the path that we took to recovery, but we don't even expect them to stay sober. All we're doing is being the person that maybe plants the mustard seed, and we don't take it personal. And they treat us horribly, and they don't think about our life, and they don't care about if we have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or kids or a job. They need us right now, and we take the call. and we share our experience, and we share our hope, and we share our strength. And we don't expect them to ever. We set boundaries. We talk to them about respect, and we tell them all these things about building character with no expectation. I have no expectation on the people I sponsor. Doesn't mean I don't get frustrated with them, because I work with knuckleheads. Every person I work with is a knucklehead. You know, some of you might be familiar with Anthony DeMello, and he talks about it's not his job to wake anybody up. And that being said, every once in a while, he's going to shake them and scream in their face, "Wake up!" knowing that they're not going to wake up because they're not ready. And I have that experience at times. Who's helping who? I'm so blessed by the people I sponsor, even when they frustrate me, even when they don't follow direction, even when they're inconsistent, even when they think they know everything. you know, what a blessing. My life is full of blessings today. Why? Because I gave everything up. I turned my life completely, my will and my life over to God. My life is no longer my own. On a deeper level, the third step decision will become the most important decision you've ever made in your life. And you will continue daily to have experiences in step 3, in step 2, in step 1. This is a way of life. The 12 steps of this recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous are circular. They're not linear. It's a way of life. From steps 4 through 9, we have this initial experience. We have deeper experiences. I do annual work in this stuff. But then it becomes a way of life in 10, 11, and 12, where I've incorporated 4 through 9. Every day is a first step situation. Every day is a second step situation. Every day I have to die in that decision. My life is no longer my own. The basic text says it throughout. Constant thought of others. My will aligning with God's will for me. Good Samaritan every day. It tells me that I will have this way of life provided I follow these few simple directions. It tells me over and over what must happen. It tells me that I will be put in a position of safe neutrality. The problem will be removed, provided I'm in fit spiritual condition. I'm going to tell you all, and then I'm going to let it go. 2 blessings that I've been given. I don't suffer anymore today. God's removed my capacity, my tolerance to suffering. And I've also been given the great gift of that inner resistance to God's love and discipline, which are the same thing. His grace and his mercy, or her. I don't have any inner resistance to either. I love God. I'm madly in love with God. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love myself, and I love all of you. For somebody who hated God, who looked at people as game pieces, who everything was transactional, to the man I am today. What a blessing. And only through this relationship, conscious connection with God, is the solution. Thank you very much.